Hello and welcome to Oakville Matters. This is television that connects our community. With me today to talk about how to create stronger, healthier kids are a panel of experts on the subject, ranging from the school board to the YMCA and the region of Halton. On my left right here is Suzanne Burwell, who's the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator of the Halton District School Board, Julia Brdarevic, who's the public health nurse with Healthy Families, the region of Halton, and Lisa Rankin, who's the Vice President of Child Care and Community Initiatives at YMCA Oakville. Now, it's a favorite theme of mine that we can only have as good a society or as good a community as we're willing to work together to create together. And there's lots of evidence that in Oakville and in Halton we might be among the very best in the world at doing that. We're the safest community in Canada for 9 years in a row. We actually have the highest longevity of any community, and I usually mention that we have the highest level of health or the lowest level of disease, which leads to the fact that it's no surprise that you live longer. And we have, in Oakville at least, an extraordinarily different profile of our community than the country or the province or indeed some of our neighbors, in that we have a lot of families with kids. So when you are working on persuading parents that the most important thing they can do is to take measures to make their kids healthier and stronger by being more active, you're also helping to make a stronger community as well. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with being the safest community, but there's also nothing wrong with being safer. There's nothing wrong with having the longest life, but everybody'd like to live a little more, I think. So, Suzanne, what are the guidelines that the school board uses to? I mean, how are you working? A lot of people tell me that the biggest problem in Oakville is moms who want to drive their kids right to the door of the school, whereas when we were kids, I believe we walked uphill both ways to school, whether it was raining or snowing or what. So how are we dealing with that problem?
So part of it is the communication that goes out. One of the things that we noted was when we talk about kiss and ride, the best way to use a kiss and ride was that people thought that's what they should do. So we flipped that communication now, and we suggest to parents that they walk with their kids. If they can't walk all the way, that they park a block away and then walk a block with their kids, so that the kids and the parents are getting the physical activity in the morning.
Well, and you're sneaking in exercise for mom and dad. Very good.
Well, that ties into the healthy communities. We always say you can't just have walk to school, you have to have a walkable community because it's for everybody. So any infrastructure changes benefit the entire community when we go through there.
Now, I heard of an idea that really caught my fancy, which was to have the school bus stop a block away from the school and have kids walk the final block. Is that going on too, or not yet?
Not yet, especially being the first 2 weeks of school this year. The school buses come all the way to the school. If you've got 70 children getting off a school bus, and some of them are as young as 3 years old, we want the school bus to be stopping at the appropriate place so that the kids can be walked through to the back of the schoolyard.
I had this fanciful image that 1 week you'd stop a block away, the next week 2 blocks away, the next week 3 blocks away. You gradually teach and train them to walk the whole way.
Well, school buses are for students that, especially in elementary, they live more than 1.6 kilometers away from the school, which for a young child is a good 20-30 minute walk. After that, they're getting farther away from the school for programming reasons or whatever. But we do encourage on the other side that students walk to the school bus stop so that they're getting their exercise before they get on the school bus.
Well, I know in my neighborhood, I live right across the street from the school bus stop, and the parents and kids in my neighborhood are following your design. That's happening. It's like a big social congregation at the start of the day and at the end of the school day.
And that's part of the walking to school, is developing those social connections and building that community so you know who is in your community.
So we're going to have school buses if we live more than 1.6 kilometers as long as you have school bus drivers, right?
As long as we have school bus drivers.
So now, Julie, at the region, do we hand out any advice to the families about how much or what kinds of activity to engage in? What's the wisdom we're sharing with them?
So absolutely, we're seeing now we have 24-hour movement guidelines, which is a little bit of a shift in our thinking. The Canadian Physical Activity Guidelines are for children and youth ages 5 to 17, and the recommendation is up to 60 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity a day. So those are the kind of activities where you're noticing you're getting your heart rate up. It might be slightly more difficult to be talking, and really those exercises that make you feel like you're starting to sweat. So we really want to encourage up to 60 minutes a day. But where we're also noticing more evidence is that we want to reduce the amount of time where kids are sedentary or just sitting around doing very low physical activity.
Video games?
Yes, and we know that electronics and different kinds of technology is a big reason why children and youth are sitting for long periods of time. And then lastly, the third part of the 24-hour movement guidelines is we're showing more evidence that sleep is so important. So the recommendation is 9 to 11 hours of uninterrupted sleep a night for children that are 5 to 13. And then for children between the ages of 14 and 17, anywhere from 8 to 10 hours of uninterrupted sleep.
How about children over the age of 21? How much sleep do we need?
Well, most adults, everyone's a little bit individual, but it's really anywhere from 7 to 10 hours as well for adults.
I read an article the other day, I'm not sure whether it was junk science or real science, that said that your learning of things is enhanced if you get a proper sleep, because your memories are laid down while you're sleeping. So if you've studied and you want to do well, your best idea is to get a good night's sleep rather than to power through and take the test without resting.
Yeah, and I think, like, especially in the childhood age, we know that a lot of growth and development happens in the brain, and so sleep is so important to see that proper growth and development.
Now, Lisa, at the Y, every time I go there, everybody's active, and there's kids running around everywhere, which is fabulous. It's kind of it's the closest thing to a community center that South Central Oakville has ever had, or at least until next year when we open the Oakville Community Center on Kerr Street at Rebecca. Do you have what's the most popular form of activity that you see?
Wow, the building is always hopping. You're right. There's children there with their families all the time. I think anything that can really get families together in the same space, being active together, has been popular. So things like our family fitness programs. We have family sport programs where they can do basketball, or we have open gym times where there's equipment out and the bouncy castles out where they can just participate. One of the most popular programs for children that we offer is our basketball program. So we run the junior MBA program and the Steve Nash program, and lots of uptake there. And then we have some generic games and sports programs. Our Y for the younger children really focus on those fundamental skills movement. We're really aiming to build physical literacy in children. So it's really about throwing and catching and balance and agility and coordination, things like that. So anything that can enhance and foster that is helpful for us.
I've never heard the expression physical literacy, and it really caught my imagination when I heard it. What a great concept.
Yeah, well, it's really about preparing children with the early skills they need to do functional things as adults. And so if you don't learn balance and coordination and agility, you're not going to be able to walk on ice in the winter, and you're not going to be able to shovel your snow or things like that. Carry groceries.
You might have trouble learning to skate.
That's right. Yeah. Throwing a ball, playing baseball. I have a left-handed child, I think, so I want him to throw a baseball.
Well, there are left-handed pitchers, so you can rest assured and comfortable that he will be able to if he wants to.
Yeah, that's what I'm aiming for. And then Ys across the country, we spend most of our programs are really outcomed on making sure children have that minimum expectation of physical activity in a day. So when we do our summer camp programs or our childcare programs, physical activity is really embedded in all of those programs as well.
And is the Y full? Do you have capacity to, if we've inspired parents to want to get their kids into the Y, can you take them, or are you full up?
No, absolutely. We are never full up. We just create more space and more time to offer the programs. And one thing, I've been a lifelong advocate of the Y. I've worked there for many, many years. But one thing I think that is really good to know is that any family can participate. So whether you have the financial means to get involved or not is irrelevant. We open our doors and give you access regardless of your ability to pay. So we don't want that to be a barrier.
Very, very important point. Can you tell us a little more how that works?
Yeah, you just walk into our building and let us know that you want to be a part of the Y, and we have a conversation with you. It's a very non-intrusive process of identifying your need, and then you just pay the monthly rate that feels comfortable with you.
Oh my.
For a membership.
So it's pay what you can, it sounds like.
Yeah, there's an income cutoff. We actually follow the Halton region guidelines as it relates to childcare subsidy too. So families get a general sense. If I'm receiving childcare subsidy through region and I'm kind of supported at this rate, if I go into a Y, it would be similar.
Amazing. So the Y's Healthy Kids Day, what is that?
Yeah, it's a big, it's a national YMCA event. It's held on the first Sunday in June for our organization. Many Ys will do it at the end of April. And it's a day dedicated to celebrating the health of children and families in our community. So in our Y, it's a free, accessible event for everybody, and we run activities right from toddlerhood up to 17. So we have our mobile skate park, we do basketball programs, we do outdoor sport programs, we have family fitness programs happening during that day, and then we'll have partners, community partners come in and talk about health and nutrition and various support and resources parents can access in the community.
Is this well attended?
It's really well attended. We feel like we're really busy on that day. There's at least 1,500 to 2,000 people who come through, and again, it's free. And if you can't get to our Y, we actually do bus shuttle services out into neighborhoods. So we'll go into neighborhoods and pick families up where there's a barrier of them getting to us.
So this all supports my perception that Oakville and Halton, for that matter, is full of parents who care. Now, Julia, one of the nicest reports I ever read as a regional counselor was the one from Public Health talking about how good maternal health and neonatal health are in Halton. So it sounds like kids are getting a good birth start, and parents are doing well. Is there more there?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I think our messaging really goes across the lifespan. So even young couples that are thinking about becoming parents, we really want to start working with them to be developing healthy lifestyle practices very early on, so that they have healthy pregnancies, and we know as they go on into their parenting journey that they're going to be the best role model for their kids. So we know that if they're active, then that translates to their kids being active as well. So absolutely, we offer a variety of programs across the lifespan, but it really does start early on.
Well, that's great. And once they get to the school age, the board has and I imagine the Catholic board does very much the same thing, and you probably work with your
We do.
all across Halton. I've always been impressed how there's this cross-fertilization that goes on. So, for example, the town managers of each of the 4 local municipalities and the region's equivalent person, they meet regularly, and all through all the serving and helping people have they touch base with each other a lot. So I imagine you do too. Can you tell us a little bit about the different activities that moms and dads can get their kids ready for around getting to school in a more active way? Like, I'm thinking of I heard about a walking school bus. What is the walking school bus?
So the walking school bus is one way where you sort of build that community further. It is run by parents through a parent initiative, and basically you have two responsible adults at the beginning and the end of your bus, and they pick kids up at specified spaces along a designated route, and they walk to school together. Essentially, as we did when we were young, you call on one friend, and those two friends call on another friend, and you end up with a group of kids arriving at school together.
I remember that. I also remember when I was a kid that kids were crossing guards.
I was one.
And I was too.
Me too. Were you?
No, I wasn't.
Well, now no kids apparently can be.
We started last year, and we piloted a few schools in Halton where we have school safety patrols. It's still run by CAA. It has been run for the past 85 years.
That's what it was called when I did it. It was safety patrol.
Right.
And all the kids, we all liked the funny belty badge.
We have it was an orange one that kind of zipped in. Now they have vests. Right now, the pilot programs that we ran, they ran on school properties, and they were about getting kids off the bus and round to the back of the school, and at entry and exit points where students were crossing, just to be having the students on site. We don't send kids off by themselves anymore to
do crossing guards.
2, 3, 4 blocks from school.
I liked it. I thought it was kind of cool. And my post was at the end of my street, where my street hit the arterial road. And when the last kid from my street had gone, then I went. But I guess that was too simple. Now, there's a bike train, I gather, too?
There have been people who put together bike trains. It's the same idea. I'm not sure that we have any running in Halton right now, although we do have events that encourage students to bike to school. We do a bike to school week at the end of May, beginning of June. We do International Walk to School Month, which is October, so we really promote kids walking to school at that point in time. A lot of schools do things such as Walking Wednesdays, where they pick a day and they really encourage students to walk at that point in time. And the hope is that as you participate in these events, that you develop those community relationships, that it becomes part of the day. And we try to focus mostly on students walking to school, because we found that if you walk to school, you're more likely to walk home.
Well,
so if you build a habit, there is.
See.
But students who are driven, then they would be more likely to be picked up. And we understand that there's all kinds of activities that go on.
My parents wouldn't drive us to school if the world was coming to an end. What happened between then and now? Is there an age after which we don't provide busing and they are expected to ride their bike or get themselves to school, or
It's provincially set, the distances. So for elementary, K to 8, it's 1.6 kilometers. In high school, I believe it's 3.2 kilometers. That after that, under that point, you are expected to get to school through your own means.
Can you generalize what the radius of service would be for a Halton High School? I imagine it's different everywhere, but what would pick a high school, would there be kids going to it further away than 3.2 kilometers?
Yes. Certainly in Halton, especially if you get farther north, we have less high schools. Students come from a larger distance. As you get more towards the rural areas, you will again have more students bused. A lot of time it's driven by programming. If there's a particular program that the students are involved in, they might, French immersion would be a good example, where we don't provide French immersion in every school, so that might determine the boundaries.
What about after-school activities? If a kid is staying for after school, how do they then get home? Is there a late bus or something like that, or do we encourage active mobility at that point?
Well, we always encourage active mobility, and certainly I know my son, we live approximately 5 kilometers from the high school, so he is eligible for busing. But if he wants to stay late, it's not unreasonable to say, well, take your bike and ride. That would be our personal choice.
Does that work?
Does it?
With your son?
Well, it's either a walk or a bike, so it's his choice.
So there's an active child success story going on there, it sounds like. So we got to ask parents, to work at this, and I'd be interested to hear how it goes.
Well, I think too they develop, and certainly in some of our communities we have public transit, so that's an option as well to get home. And again, I certainly, in a lot of cases, if you play on a sports team that goes late, you tend to play with friends, and carpooling is always a good option in that respect as well.
Carpooling is allowed. I'd like to know if there's an undone thing that needs to be done or added to make healthier, more active kids. And why don't we start with you, Lisa? What would be your number one wish that we could do that we don't do yet?
My number one hope for children in Halton would be if they're not involved in a supervised care program directly after school, that they have access to accessible, active programs in those after-school hours. I think one of the biggest disservices is when children leave school and go home and their families or parents aren't there, and so they're choosing unhealthy snacks and they're sitting in front of a TV and they're gaming. My hope and my dream would be that every child from that's school-aged could have access to high-quality sport and recreation programs.
We used to call those Latchkey Kids, I think.
I was a latchkey kid. I walked home with my brother, and in between watching TV, we fought as well. So, so my goal would be that they would have access to really good, high-quality, active programs, but also have the idea of an adult mentor in their life who could kind of coach and give them some advice and support as they work through their adolescent years.
Do any of us offer? I don't want to call it training, but let me call it training, education, or some kind of help for parents whose kids have to be latchkey kids and they're not going to be engaged in a structured activity. Do we have a program about how to make your kid successful at latchkey kidding?
Yeah, we have something called, I'm totally not going to get this right because I don't run it, but it's something centered around being safe at home, safety 101 kind of thing that I know we do in partnership with another organization, and then we do babysitter training. So I think there's components of that help you understand how to be at home safely as well.
So if you're learning to be a babysitter to care for others, you might internalize that and help yourself at the same time.
That's
if
right.
you're, what is babysitting still? My kids, they had to be 12.
Yeah.
So around 11, my daughters were very keen to make money as babysitters. So at 11, they were busy taking this course.
Building their client list.
My son, not so much, but that probably was all for the best. What about at the region? Are we alive to this issue of, if it's an issue of latchkey kids?
Well, there is one program out in the community. It's called At Home Alone. We don't run that program anymore, but some of our community partners are offering that. And like Lisa had said, it's really just teaching them to be safe, to know what to do. If someone comes to the door, if they get a phone call, how to approach those situations. So I think they're great for really helping kids to feel comfortable and more confident that they can be okay until an adult gets home.
So I'm just wondering. Suzanne, I'm suddenly going, maybe latchkey kids is no longer an acceptable term. maybe I'm being politically incorrect even saying the phrase. Maybe safe at home is the new jargon. What's your sense of that?
I think that the school board, in conjunction with other organizations, offer these programs on PA days after school. So they're working with the kids in their school community, taking these courses at the same time. So we promote that as well.
So on PD, what do you call them? PD or PA?
I think it's probably PD days.
PD days?
Professional development days.
So on these days, when for a family where both parents work, we're creating a whole bunch of temporary latchkey kids, I guess, in a sense. Is that right?
Well, I think a lot of community partners provide programming on those particular days. The Y might run a program instead of being a before and after school program that's in the school. They would provide all-day programming for those students.
And we also offer programming during March break and winter breaks as well.
So you get surges then, maybe?
Oh yes.
So there's a
full
lot
day
of
programming.
There's a lot of Y programming that occurs in schools. So they just expand it when the regular classes aren't there.
Well, I know town recreation programs
Yeah.
get a surge. So I guess altogether, the community joins hands and tries to support this phenomenon.
I mean, our Y works closely with the town of Oakville as well, and there's no shortage of children and families in our community. So even in our camps and full-day professional development days, we're always both full. So I think more of that would be great too.
Well, I was struck by the news several weeks ago that the census showed that for the first time, the number of people 65 and over and 14 and under was now equal at 16% each of the population overall. And so I was struck by that, and I went and looked at the census report, and I discovered that that was true of the province of Ontario also. But interestingly, in Oakville, the percent of 14 and under is still much bigger than the percent that's 65 and over, and our 14 and under is significantly above 16%, and our percent that are 65 and over is significantly below 16%. And I looked next door at Burlington, and it was the flip. It was the opposite. They had more seniors than the average and fewer kids than the average. And I looked at Milton, and the difference there seemed to be that Oakville has teenagers and Milton has grade school.
Yes, that's right.
It's got to be fun for the school board to, because every one of those is kind of a moving thing through time. I can't imagine the management problem you have around having the right number of classrooms and teachers and all at the right stage.
It is a challenge. Milton is, as we all know, a fast-growing community, so they're constantly adding at the bottom at the present time.
And they love it. Or at least when I talk to their mayor, he likes to tell me how when he got elected 53 years ago to the council, they were a village of 5,000, and they were always having the sand kicked in their face by the bullies at the beach. And they're going to be the biggest city someday, and they're already like 110,000. So they're a lot harder to kick sand in the face of. Do you find a difference between Milton and among the 4 local municipalities?
Well, definitely it's a growing community, and we are seeing lots of new families moving into Milton. So I think it's just, these things happen across our neighborhoods depending on where there is housing and what can entice those families to come and live there. So.
Well, it's good news for parents of young kids and old kids that there is help available and that we're doing very well. Next time on Oakville Matters, I hope to see you again.